expectations too high. One of Iraq's major problems since 2003 isn't that nothing was done. Actually, a lot was achieved. If you look at many of the macroeconomic metrics, Iraq has progressed significantly. But the challenge has always been, for me, a combination of two things. It's expectations being excessively high, unrealistically high, and performance lacking what it should achieve, the levels that you would expect given the resources dedicated. So essentially you have lower performance than it should be and a higher expectation that is realistic. That gap creates this frustration that you see emerge on the streets. And so, yes, we need to improve performance and results, but we also need to manage expectations. And I always worry when you look at the CVs of ministers or prime ministers or politicians and expect suddenly everything will be fixed. For me, this machine, this Iraq state machine is old. It has challenges, it has problems. Iraq has transformed significantly, and I'll come to this point more than once. Iraq has dramatically changed over the past 70 years or so. Essentially, the tools, the apparatus, the government belongs to a highly socialist, almost a communist system that's highly totalitarian, very centralized, very top-down in its approach, yet the constitution and the current political system requires different institutions. That transformation is very difficult. It gets resisted all the time, and that feeds this process. So yes, we need to fix these institutions, but simply changing the driver doesn't suddenly fix the problem if the car has its own problems. You need to fix the car slowly as well. So for me, to start with, realism is really important. And I think we need our international partners as well as internal players to understand this, to support, to give the benefit of the doubt initially, and to provide support without setting too many rules and conditions. This has been a major restrictive factor in Iraq over the past years that had plagued previous governments. And I suspect this government will face some of it. The question is, how can we minimize it? The second point to talk about is the political aspect that Ken mentioned. I'm not going to go too much into the politics, but kind of highlight a key driver for the challenges that we're facing. And I think this is also partly the challenge, partly the solution. Iraq, over the past 17 years or so, has come through many problems, and every time it emerged. So I think when I zoom out, I see a progress, I see a line that's going up. And I know many people, when they, because of their interest in Iraq, see the problems, we tend to list them. But there has been a lot of resilience. Iraq has shown to be very resilient. We've had elections after elections on time. Yes, there are points to be raised about the elections, but we had elections. We had a peaceful transfer of power, even in these circumstances. A government left, a new government came, and this is not common in the Middle East, suffice to say, and in many other parts of the world. So that all of that makes me still be optimistic. I see seeds of optimism. I think the public is maturing politically. We've had protests, we had issues with them, we had challenges, we had problems, but at least both the government side and the protests, everybody wanted them to be peaceful. And I think that shows a direction that Iraq never saw if you go back to decades previously. And I think for us, the key challenge, politically speaking, it's going to be the next elections. This is going to be a major challenge for the government, but it's not merely holding the elections. I think often people talk about the technicalities. Yes, there are technicalities with elections, but for me, the problem is not technical. Even if you have an election that's free or that's reasonably representative, there are no problems with it technically. What you need is for the public to trust in the results. So it's more of a trust in the system, trust in the process, regardless of what the outcome is. Unfortunately, our political classes contributed collectively to the erosion of this trust. we have many sore losers in Iraq when it comes to elections. Instead of blaming their own performance, it's often the elections are rigged because I didn't win. And that gradually feeds into the public. And then whatever the result is, however perfect it is, and of course it will never be perfect, but it will be questioned. And it's that legitimacy that the next government and the one after desperately needs. It will need to follow through with difficult decisions, and the public needs to see the government as representative of their own interests. They can disagree with it, but they do feel it's legitimate. That legitimacy comes from this trust in the election process. And I think this government is already starting, but will have to absolutely try very hard to do two things. Try and make it as good as possible technically, but also create and buy political consensus that whatever the results, we have to accept them as long as we believe in the process that led to those results. So that's for me the second. The third point is the economy, because I think that would be a very topical point to raise. And I see, again, obviously major challenges, but I want to disaggregate this. Of course, oil prices collapsed. When you look at into the near future, there is no hope for oil prices to recover significantly. Storage quantities are huge. Demand is low, and it's low for fundamental reasons because of COVID-19 and everything else internationally. So there's not going to be a huge increase in demand, which means however much you sell, you're going to sell less in quantity and much less in price. And for an economy like Iraq's, which is heavily dominated by oil, it's a serious problem. But again, this oil price collapse only brought forward the timing when you need the decision. Iraq, if you look at all the projections for where our expenditure was, it was always heading to unsustainable levels. And it's largely expenditure on social benefits, on social aspects. If you look at salaries plus social security payments plus pensions, Iraq requires something in the range of 5 trillion Iraqi dinars per month, over $4 billion a month. This is not sustainable, whatever the oil price may be for the foreseeable future. And so this opportunity, this challenge, as Ken mentioned, is also a major opportunity. I do see the public, and increasingly the government will need to play a bigger role in this. The public knows there is an economic problem. It can only be sustainable if we make some difficult cuts and take difficult decisions, make difficult reforms. If we take this opportunity, and I believe there is a real interest and intent to do so, and we will need our international partners to support us, is that then you can permanently or on a long-term basis fix this drain. So rather than go to after projects and shut them down and keep paying salaries, we will need to improve our taxation, our customs operations, but also we need to look at this unsustainable budget. And we can do it in a smart way. Progressive taxation, we can protect the lower income public sector workers, for example, focus on the higher income ones. We can give special preference to the private sector. Iraq's future will only be sustainable if the private sector takes hold and if the state, which was, as I started and mentioned, has been hugely enlarged, if the state begins to get out of the way and let economics and let normal capitalist forces and market forces control and move the situation forward. This is a big challenge. It's a big challenge to wean a nation that has depended on government payouts, oil-based government payouts for decades. But also, I believe there is now a realization. People are asking, what are you gonna cut? They're not asking if you are gonna cut. And I think that's a major mindset shift. It needs to be managed, needs to be handled, but I do see this crisis could create a real opportunity for a sustainable reform, so that when in the future oil prices improve, we can use that money to improve our infrastructure, to enable sectors to start. One final remark, one final point to mention is Iraq's agriculture. We've seen a major improvement last year in Iraq's agriculture. In 2018, wheat production, for example, in Iraq was approximately 2.5 million tons. Last year was approximately 5 million tons. This was the highest figure on Iraq's records. We expect this year, we have less water, but we expect the production to be even higher. And this really saved the day in a COVID environment where borders are shut, imports are difficult, while food prices in Iraq are good and stable. And that, I think, will give the government an argument, is that we can begin to diversify away from oil, we can support economies or sectors of society that can help others, but it does need everybody else to kind of cooperate on this.